Hello, Anointed Ones, and welcome back to the Anointed TV channel. Today, we're covering a major development in the ongoing Lamb family controversy. Rachel Lamb Brown, sister to Jonathan Lamb, has publicly released another detailed statement defending her mother, Joni Lamb, Pete, and addressing the accusations surrounding their family. In her 30-minute statement, Rachel presents text messages, documentation, and a timeline to refute the allegations made by Jonathan and Susie Lamb. She highlighted the key points, including the contradictions in the accusations, the 2020 bathroom incident, professional evaluations, and the changing role of mediator Denise Bogs. The story begins with serious accusations against a relative, Pete, made by Jonathan and Susie Lamb. Julie Roys, a journalist covering the story, claimed Pete was alone with Jonathan and Susie's daughter during a key incident. But Rachel's statement highlights some crucial contradictions which she highlights in the video. Rachel's statement also covers the 2020 bathroom incident, an accidental encounter Pete reported immediately to Susie. This is the incident when Susie's daughter walked in on Pete when he was showering. In Rachel's statement, she emphasizes the role of forensic child psychologist Debbie Linhart. She says that Debbie found no evidence to support the allegations against Pete. Another key figure in Rachel's statement is Denise Bogs. Initially, Denise played the role of mediator, flying to Dallas to help reconcile the family. But Rachel reveals Denise later changed her position, raising questions about her credibility and motivations. Now let's get into the video, and I will be back with more comments on the contents there in
The truth about Pete. Julie Roys and Jonathan and Susie Lamb have made serious accusations, but their story keeps changing. Let's break it down. Claim number 1, Pete was alone. Julie Roys initially claimed Pete was alone in the room with Jonathan and Susie's daughter, but here's the truth. The truth, Pete wasn't alone. Julie later retracted, admitting Jonathan and Susie's 8-year-old son was in the room. Pete was holding his baby. This changes everything. Claim number 2, Pete was staring. Julie Roys implied Jonathan caught Pete staring at his daughter while she was naked. But now, Jonathan says something very different. Jonathan's own words. In a recent Dallas Morning News article, Jonathan corroborates Pete's story that he was standing by the window holding his baby. He also admits he doesn't even know if Pete was looking at his daughter. The article says, "There's my daughter, completely naked, and the relative is in the room," Jonathan Lamb said. The relative was standing by a window with his baby, Jonathan Lamb said. Jonathan Lamb said things happened so quickly that he's not sure whether the relative was looking at his daughter. If Jonathan doesn't know, why was this accusation made? 2 massive contradictions. Number 1, Pete wasn't alone in the room. 2 other kids were present. Number 2, Jonathan admits he can't confirm Pete was even looking at his daughter. How can their story be trusted when the details keep changing? The bigger picture. These evolving accusations are destroying lives. The story keeps changing because it isn't based on truth. The truth matters. The truth about Julie Roy's 1216 podcast, Susie and Jonathan's Contradictions Exposed. Jonathan begins the podcast by discussing his daughter's allegations of sexual abuse, stating that he took her to meet with Joni to see if she would disclose anything about the alleged incident. He implies that after this meeting, his daughter never mentioned it again, suggesting Joni may have dismissed or shut her down. However, in a startling moment, Susie interrupts Jonathan to admit they don't actually know if Joni said anything at all, exposing a significant contradiction in their narrative. Watch this.
And looking back on it now, I'm just like I shouldn't have left her alone with my mom. Just because I couldn't have imagined my mom could have done anything nefarious at that point. It was just hard for me to imagine that. But
we don't know if she actually did.
Later in the podcast, Susie claims that her daughter told her the night before she reported the alleged abuse at the school that the person who touched her was, quote-unquote, taller than daddy. This detail is presented as a critical aspect of her narrative. Watch this.
My daughter the night before had told me, I asked her boy or girl.
Yeah.
She said boy. Okay, how tall? I was trying to gauge an age maybe. And so she said taller than daddy.
However, this assertion directly conflicts with Susie's own real-time text messages at the time of the incident, where she consistently referred to the alleged abuser as a boy. If Susie believed the abuser was a man, why did she repeatedly describe him as a boy in her communications during that time? For example, after reporting the incident to the police, Susie took her daughter to her pediatrician for an examination, which confirmed there was no physical evidence of abuse. On November 6, 2020, Susie relayed the doctor's findings in a text message to Rachel saying, Dr. Robert said my daughter is good. No damage, no scarring, no UTI or infection, praise God. When Rachel asked about the pain her daughter had been experiencing, Susie explained it was due to constipation caused by dairy, which was putting pressure on her bladder. Rachel then asked if Susie would allow her daughter to return to school, to which Susie replied, yeah, as of now, I think it's okay because that boy isn't there anymore, and she loves her class and teacher. Susie's confidence in sending her daughter back to school just days after the alleged incident strongly suggests she felt certain about the boy's identity and was comfortable with her daughter returning to the same environment where the alleged abuse occurred. A few weeks later, on November 20th, 2020, Susie texted Rachel a prophetic word her best friend had for her daughter. In response, Rachel asked, does she know what happened? Susie replied, not really. I didn't want to talk about it, so I just said something happened at her school. I mentioned a boy touched her. Here we see, on two separate occasions, both immediately right after the incident on November 6th and weeks later on November 20th, Susie consistently referred to the alleged abuser as a boy. These real-time text messages confirm that her daughter identified the abuser as a boy, not a man, as Susie would later falsely claim. This glaring inconsistency raises serious questions about the credibility of Susie's evolving narrative. Later in the podcast interview, Susie admits to asking her daughter leading questions about the alleged abuse, which inherently suggests the possibility of influencing her daughter's responses. This acknowledgement raises concerns about whether the narrative was organically formed or shaped through the nature of Susie's questioning. Watch this.
I didn't know what leading questions were. I said, did something happen in the bathroom, in the cafe? And, she's 5 years old. She's nodding along. She goes, yeah. I said, was there a friend who saw anything? Mm-hmm.
Here, Susie recounts the story exactly as she initially presented it, admitting that she asked her daughter questions like, did it happen in the cafeteria? Did a friend see it? And her daughter simply nodded in response. This admission fully aligns with the version of the story she originally shared when the alleged incident occurred, further corroborating that the narrative wasn't spontaneously shared by her daughter, but shaped through Susie's own questioning. As Susie recounts the alleged abuse story further, she admits that her daughter wanted to return to school after the incident, telling her the boy is gone. Even here, in this very podcast, Susie admits her daughter referred to the alleged abuser as a boy, not someone taller than daddy. Watch this.
And our daughter, this was the crazy part, she wanted to stay at school.
Right.
And so to stay at school, she started saying, oh, the boy's gone. Everything's fine.
Later in the podcast, Susie admits she was deeply saddened when the police closed the case, stating that she had to trust God with the timing. This acknowledgement shows that even after the authorities found no evidence and officially closed the investigation, Susie was still unwilling to let it go. Watch this.
There's no suspect, so they closed the case, rightfully so. I was sad because I needed answers, but I had to trust God with the timing. Even my mom and dad had to walk me through that process, so you have to trust God.
This emotional struggle is further evidenced by a text Susie sent on November 20th, 2020 to Rachel saying, please pray for me. Tough day today. Susie explained that it was the first day she personally dropped her daughter off at school since the incident. Previously, the nanny had been handling drop-offs. She wrote, when I dropped my daughter off at school just now, a surge of anger and pain hit me. I realize I have some hurt and trust issues I have to work on. Susie's text messages with Rachel. It's evident from Susie's own words that she was deeply struggling with the situation and having difficulty processing it. Despite receiving confirmation from the doctor that there was no physical evidence of harm, she still couldn't let go of the belief that something had happened. Her emotional turmoil, expressed in the surge of anger and pain when dropping her daughter off at school, highlights that she wasn't coping well with the incident. Even with the absence of evidence, Susie continued to wrestle with feelings of distress and unresolved hurt, unable to fully move forward from what she feared had taken place. This ongoing struggle suggests that Susie's unresolved pain clouded her ability to see the situation clearly, leading her to misplace her grief and ultimately direct her emotions towards a new accusation against someone who was entirely innocent. By not fully confronting her inner turmoil, Susie's unprocessed emotions distorted her perception of reality, driving her to find blame where none existed, and perpetuating a cycle of unfounded accusations. One of the most glaring examples of this distorted narrative emerged when Joni revealed a significant detail that Susie had initially omitted. Her daughter claimed the boy had also touched her best friend. Afterward, on this podcast, Julie Roys directly asked Susie about this detail, and Susie admitted that her daughter had said yes, but also confessed that her daughter was simply going along with everything Susie was saying. Watch this.
She says even here another girl that was involved.
In conversations with my daughter at that point, because I was scared for her to go to school, there might have just been random conversations with my child, like, do you have a friend with you? Oh, yeah. She just was going along with everything I was saying.
This revelation raises a critical question. If Susie's daughter was merely agreeing with her mother's suggestions, how can we trust that her daughter ever truly confessed to any alleged abuse at all? Susie's own admission casts doubts on whether the narrative she has presented reflects her daughter's account or one shaped entirely by her own questioning. The issue of omitted details and altered narratives continues when Susie recounts the 2021 beach incident. Susie admits on this podcast that she knew Pete was carrying a baby during the incident, yet she claimed the baby was a quote-unquote non-factor in this story and conveniently left this key detail out of the Julie Roys article. Not only was this omitted, but Julie went further, falsely stating that Pete was alone with Susie's daughter. Watch this.
Yes, that baby was right there, and he just started to fall. The baby was a non-factor.
The contradictions don't stop there. When Julie Roys questioned Jonathan about where Pete was during the incident, Jonathan admits that Pete was standing by the window, not near his daughter. Watch this.
They're saying he's looking out the window in some of these.
Pete is by the window.
Jonathan then takes it a step further, definitively stating that Pete was not next to his daughter, did not have his hands on her, and was simply in the room during the incident. Watch this.
So he was not next to, he didn't have his hands on her, but he was in the room with, it's in room.
From there, Susie attempts to justify why they are making such a big deal out of the 2021 beach incident. She acknowledges that people might question the significance of the situation if Pete's hands weren't on her daughter, claiming she wants to explain a pattern. However, she uses this highly suggestive language to describe what was in reality an innocent event. Watch this.
I would like to explain the pattern because in 2020 on that beach, on a different beach vacation in 2020, our leadership retreat of Daystar, Pete himself told me that my child walked on him in the bathroom, full frontal, naked, and saw him fully nude.
What she is referring to is a single instance when her daughter accidentally walked in on Pete while he was taking a shower at the beach. Why is she framing such an innocent situation in such a provocative way? Julie Roys then presses Susie on another critical point. Watch this.
Doors have locks, correct?
And silence. Susie doesn't answer the question. Why? Because she knew the lock was broken. More on that story below. Stay with me. Adding another layer to this evolving narrative, Julie Roys herself admits that Jonathan and Susie told her Pete was holding a baby during the 2021 incident. Yet, she chose to leave this key fact out of her reporting. Not only did she omit it, but she falsely claimed in her original article that Pete was alone in the room. The article has since been altered, but this clear admission shows she intentionally misrepresented the facts to support their narrative. Original article, new article. Watch this.
There's been just a really big deal out of the fact that I did not mention in my story that Pete was holding a 1-year-old baby, that between interview number 1 and interview number 2 with Joni became fussy. But this 1-year-old baby, I didn't include it not because you didn't tell me, because you guys did tell me. In fact, I had it in my initial copy, and when I'm trimming my article, I trimmed it out because, again, I'm trying to make sure that any extraneous details aren't in there. I know you don't want to really include other children, but it was a non-factor.
Julie further reveals that Jonathan and Susie's son was also in the room during the incident, a detail Susie failed to disclose, but Jonathan shared with her. Why did Susie leave out such an important fact? Watch this.
But you did mention that your son was in the room, and I'll just be honest. At the time that I was writing this, I went back, I went through all my notes. This part, it wasn't in Susie's account, it was in your account.
As the podcast continued, Susie admits to speaking with Denise before the executive retreat about her suspicions of Pete. By Susie's own admission, this conversation left her feeling scared to attend the trip, suggesting that Denise may have amplified her fears and influenced her mindset before the retreat even began. Watch this.
A lot of incidents were building up to where I finally, when I was alone with Miss Denise Bogs, got to confide in her. And she said, oh, wow, this is looking this way. I know you don't want to go there, put your mind there because you could, you're taking the weight of this family.
Right.
But I remember that conversation, but we have to talk about some things.
Right.
So on this vacation, I was honestly even scared to go.
If Susie was truly so scared, why would she go on the trip at all? And if she already had concerns about Pete before the executive retreat, why would she allow her daughter to go upstairs with him in the first place? These actions completely contradict her claimed fears and raise serious questions about the validity of her narrative. Twisting the truth, the 2020 bathroom incident debunked. Following the 2021 beach incident with Jonathan and Pete, a family meeting was held on the bottom floor of the house to discuss what happened. During this meeting, Susie revisited an event from when the family attended a previous executive retreat. The home they stayed in had a unique design with only one bedroom located on the main floor. All the other bedrooms were upstairs. Because Pete's wife was pregnant at the time, Joni graciously decided to assign them the bedroom on the main level, understanding that frequent trips up and down the stairs would be physically taxing for her. Pete and his wife's room had the only bathroom on the main floor, conveniently located next to the kitchen and the living area. Although this would have been the easiest bathroom for everyone, Joni clearly informed the family that due to the heightened concerns about COVID, they were to use their own bathrooms throughout the trip. On the first day of this retreat, when the family noticed Netflix wasn't working, they called the maintenance man to fix it. While there, Pete and his wife also asked him to look at their bathroom door, as the lock was broken. Unfortunately, the maintenance man was unable to fix it. Pete and his wife placed a small side table in front of the door to ensure privacy, especially since the bathroom was so centrally located. This made it difficult to open the door, serving as a precaution since the lock wasn't functioning. Despite these measures, one time during the trip, Jonathan and Susie's daughter accidentally walked in on Pete while he was showering. Pete immediately turned away, asked her to leave, which she did, and after getting dressed, found Susie to inform her of what had happened. Susie laughed it off, telling him it was no big deal and that he shouldn't worry about it. Pete didn't think anything else of it, and the executive retreat continued without issue. The fact that this isolated incident is now being twisted and used as evidence against Pete is appalling. Pete acted appropriately, immediately notifying the child's mother. It is grossly unfair to frame this as anything other than what it was, an accidental moment with no ill intent, caused by circumstances beyond his control. Exposing the timeline, receipts versus Denise's false claims. After the 2021 retreat, tensions remain high within the family. So on August 10th through the 12th, 2021, Marcus and Joni sent Jonathan and Susie and their children to North Carolina to meet with Denise Bogs, their counselor, and Debbie Linhart, LFC, a professional forensic child psychologist. Debbie conducted a full interview with their daughter, who did not mention any abuse. These dates are fully corroborated by Jonathan Lamb's credit card receipts, providing clear and irrefutable evidence of the timeline. This directly contradicts Denise Boggs' inaccurate claim during her interview with Laura Lynn Thompson, in which she stated that Pete and his wife visited her first, while Jonathan and Susie came later. Watch this.
What happened with that? Did this person step in and begin interviewing all the family members and try to understand what had transpired?
The forensic counselor was Debbie Linhart. She met with Pete when he came to our retreat center here in North Carolina, and his wife. And there was a later date when Jonathan and Susie came and their daughter at a later date.
The receipts not only expose Denise's statements as inaccurate, but also highlight a troubling pattern of misinformation. This is just one of the many instances where Denise's attempt to recall events from memory was incorrect, and the receipts clearly show the discrepancies. The truth about those family visits. Following Jonathan and Susie's return, Denise informed Pete and his wife that she believed everything had been resolved and that Jonathan and Susie had processed the situation and seemed to feel better about it. However, it quickly became apparent that things were far from settled. Almost daily, Denise would call Pete and his wife with new claims or issues that Jonathan and Susie had allegedly raised. In one instance, Denise conveyed that Jonathan and Susie had talked to their Friday night date night nanny, who claimed that Pete and his wife had come over to their house to see the children when Jonathan and Susie weren't there. Pete and his wife live in the same neighborhood as Jonathan and Susie. In 2019, Pete and his wife moved there first, followed by Jonathan and Susie less than a year later. The two families live just a few hundred feet apart, making it common for them to interact within the neighborhood. Pete and his wife often walked by Jonathan and Susie's house to visit the kids, or vice versa. This close, casual relationship is evident through a myriad of text messages exchanged between the families. After Pete's wife gave birth, she struggled significantly during the postpartum period, and several times asked Pete to take their child on a walk to visit his cousins, which provided her a much-needed break. On a few occasions, Pete took their baby, either in a baby wrap or stroller, to visit Jonathan and Susie's home. There was also times when Pete's wife went on her own to see the kids while Pete was away. Similarly, Jonathan and Susie would occasionally ask to stop by Pete and his wife's house as well. The proximity of their homes fostered frequent natural interactions between the two families. Living just one street apart meant that spontaneous visits, family walks, and shared moments were common and an integral part of their relationship, underscoring the closeness between the families at the time. Before Pete's wife was married, there were occasions when, after working late, she would stop by Jonathan and Susie's house with Chick-fil-A to have dinner with the kids. Susie frequently commented on how much her children loved these visits and extended an open invitation for her to come by anytime. When Jonathan and Susie later moved just a street away from Pete and his wife, Susie reiterated the same invitation, adding that their Friday nanny, who also doubled as their house cleaner, appreciated these visits because they allowed her to focus on cleaning without having to supervise the kids. Although Pete and his wife only stopped by a handful of times, each visit was documented through photos and videos that were shared with Susie. Her responses consistently reflected gratitude and enthusiasm, often praising Pete and his wife as a wonderful family and expressing how much her children enjoyed their time together. Importantly, Jonathan and Susie's residence featured both exterior and interior cameras that delivered immediate motion detection alerts, keeping them constantly informed about any activity on their property. This level of monitoring is confirmed by Jonathan and Susie themselves in a recent YouTube video they posted on November 29, 2024, where they recounted a Daystar security officer visiting their home to put Jonathan's termination letter on his door. Despite not being present, they acknowledged being notified by their cameras and stated that they were able to observe the entire interaction remotely. These facts further underscore the implausibility of any activity occurring at their home without their knowledge, as suggested by their own statements. For Jonathan and Susie to claim that Pete or his wife stopping by to see the kids or going on walks with them was unusual is simply absurd. Not only is there a trove of text messages documenting these visits, but the camera notifications they would have received further confirm they were fully aware of every interaction. This paints a clear picture of a close and mutually acknowledged family dynamic, making any suggestion otherwise entirely disingenuous. No sleepovers, debunking another false claim. While Jonathan and Susie's children had a close bond with Pete and his wife, they have never spent the night at their house. Contrary to the false claim made by Jonathan and Susie in a statement to Julie Roys, there is no evidence to support this assertion, including text messages or other communications. It wouldn't make sense for them to spend the night since they live just a street away. Pete and his wife fly across the country to prove the truth. On August 19th through the 22nd, 2021, Pete and his wife and their child voluntarily flew to North Carolina to meet with Debbie Linhart, LFC. She is the same forensic child psychologist who had previously met with Jonathan, Susie, and their daughter. While Pete and his wife were frustrated they had to pick up everything and fly halfway across the country, they did so without hesitation because they were eager to prove how unfounded these accusations were and end this once and for all. Screenshot of Pete and his wife's flight information. Denise's shocking observation, a pattern emerges. While in North Carolina, Pete and his wife had extensive counseling sessions with Denise Bogs, who shared troubling insights from her recent interactions with Jonathan and Susie's children. Denise recounted an incident where, while checking on the children, Jonathan and Susie's daughter unexpectedly undressed in front of her to change. Denise was astonished to find that the same thing she had done at the beach was now happening right in front of her. She even went so far as to say it felt like a divine confirmation from God. Pete's wife commented that she hoped she didn't get accused of something like Pete had been. Professional validation. Pete is exonerated. On August 20th, 2021, Pete and his wife met with Debbie Linhart, LFC, a forensic child psychologist, to continue their thorough and professional response to the allegations. Seeking clarification to ensure the process adhered to professional guidelines, Pete's wife asked Denise Boggs if she could be present during the interview or if Debbie wanted to interview Pete alone. Denise consulted with Debbie, who confirmed she wanted to interview both Pete and his wife together. With this decision made, Denise, Debbie, Pete, and his wife all met, where Debbie conducted a comprehensive and in-depth interview. During the session, Debbie asked a series of detailed questions, which both Pete and his wife answered thoroughly and candidly, demonstrating their full cooperation and commitment to addressing this matter professionally. In the meeting, Debbie said none of this would hold up in a court of law, and it was her conclusion that this was nothing more than a big family mess, fueled by years of jealousy, competition, and lack of relationship. After hours of meeting, Denise walked Debbie to her car where they had a conversation. When Denise walked in, she let Pete and his wife know she had exonerated Pete. Pete and his wife were glad to hear it and couldn't wait to put all of this behind them. Pete's wife immediately texted Marcus saying, "The child psychologist cleared Pete," to which he responded, "Fantastic." Pete's wife replied saying, "She's got a ton of degrees and lots of experience." Marcus responded, "Excellent. I know that is such a relief for both of you to have that kind of validation." To which Pete's wife replies saying, "So now we have done literally everything everyone has asked. It's a relief, but we were both confident in the outcome because there is nothing to hide." Then Marcus replied saying, I agree. Just don't contact the other four about it, as of course Denise needs to be your defender and God. And don't post veiled references about it on social media. Marcus knew in order for the family to accept these findings, they could only be communicated by Denise, not anyone else. Marcus's text with Pete's wife. Pete asked Denise if they could obtain Debbie's findings in writing so they would have something to present her professional opinion, and Debbie agreed to do so. In the meantime, Denise was able to share with Jonathan and Susie the counselor's findings, and after that, Marcus and Joni planned for Denise to fly to Dallas to work on a path to healing. Facilitating unity, Denise's role in reconciliation. On August 29th through September 4th, 2021, Denise comes to Dallas to facilitate reconciliation. Screenshot of Denise Bogs' flight information. When Denise arrived in Dallas, Pete's wife sent her a text asking if she could share the unsettling incident that occurred during Jonathan and Susie's previous visit to Denise's home, where their daughter unexpectedly undressed in front of Denise. Pete's wife felt it was important for the family to know that the same behavior being questioned in the beach incident with Pete had also occurred in a different setting with Denise. Denise agreed to share the story, viewing it as a crucial turning point that underscored an important truth. Situations like this are not unique and could happen to anyone. Pete's wife's text with Denise. Denise met with each of the couples together where they were able to share their hearts. When Pete and his wife met with Jonathan and Susie, they all cried and apologized to one another and agreed to move forward in unity. Debunking the cover-up myth once and for all. After the meetings concluded, Pete circled back to Denise to get Debbie's findings in writing. Denise said she would follow up with Debbie. She ended up calling Pete and his wife back and said she was shocked because now Debbie was saying if they wanted something in writing, Pete would need to fly back to North Carolina for another interview. Denise told Pete he was being paranoid and that all of this was under the blood. She told Pete and his wife that they needed to move forward in unity, assuring them that this would never come up again and encouraging them to let it go. Trusting Denise's guidance, Pete and his wife decided to focus on rebuilding the relationship with Jonathan and Susie, taking deliberate steps to restore peace within the family as directed by Denise. The real question remains, if Denise truly did not believe Pete was exonerated, why would she take the significant step of flying to Dallas to facilitate family reconciliation? Such a gesture strongly suggests that she did, in fact, consider the matter resolved. If Denise still had doubts or concerns about Pete's innocence, it would have been both logical and necessary for her to express them before trying to mend relationships within the family. Her actions speak louder than words. Traveling to Dallas to assist with reconciliation shows a level of confidence in Pete's exoneration and a willingness to move forward as a family. Claiming otherwise now is not only inconsistent, but also raises questions about the motivations behind revisiting these accusations after the fact. This contradiction undermines the credibility of any lingering doubt she now claims to have. Clearly, at the time, Denise did not see any unresolved issues significant enough to prevent her from supporting the process of healing and reconciliation. If doubts existed, they should have been addressed then, not retroactively fabricated to fit a different narrative. Legal and ethical failures, Debbie Linhart's credibility in question. The most concerning aspect of this situation is Debbie Linhart's failure to fulfill her legal obligation under North Carolina's mandatory reporting laws. If, during her interviews with Jonathan and Susie, their daughter, Pete, and his wife, she suspected any child sexual abuse, she was legally required to report it. The fact that no such report was made strongly suggests that Debbie did not believe abuse had occurred. This failure to act in accordance with mandatory reporting laws raises serious questions about the validity of the allegations and significantly undermines her credibility as a professional. Debbie's egregious violation of client confidentiality compounds this issue. Despite being bound by both state law and the American Counseling Association Code of Ethics, she disclosed sensitive client details to the media without informed consent. These actions demonstrate a clear disregard for professional standards and ethical obligations, raising questions about her integrity and reliability. It's interesting because when Susie is talking to Julie Roys about the forensic psychologist interviewing her daughter after the incident, she says this.
I mean, whose job is it to fight to the very end? Her parents. It's our job. We have to do this.
It's true. The burden of an allegation like this lies with the parents. So if their daughter truly was so terrified as they state, why did they never report it? Why did they never put their daughter in counseling when they returned home, as per her suggestion? Their inaction speaks louder than their words if they truly believe something happened to their daughter. Their lack of follow-through raises serious doubts about the legitimacy of their claims. 38 months later, Denise's troubling shift. Adding to this troubling narrative is Denise Bogs' behavior. Not only did Denise betray client confidentiality by sharing sensitive information, but she also manipulated the narrative by changing her story over time. If Denise genuinely believed Pete had acted inappropriately, why would she travel to Dallas to help facilitate family reconciliation? Her actions at the time show that she did not perceive any wrongdoing, and her decision to disclose troubling details 38 months later seems more aligned with retaliation after her relationship with Daystar ended than with any true concern for justice. There was no cover-up. The facts speak for themselves. Marcus and Joni never covered anything up. Pete has been transparent and cooperative at every step, going above and beyond to address these baseless accusations. The ever-changing narratives and contradictions from Jonathan, Susie, Denise, and Debbie reveal the truth. This entire situation is built on falsehoods, manipulation, and retaliation. The reality is clear. There was no cover-up, and this entire saga is an outrageous distortion of the truth. Susie's final statement to Julie Roys confirms exactly what we've been saying all along. This was never about Pete. It's not about justice for their daughter. It's about targeting Joni, undermining Daystar, and attempting to unseat her. This has always been about power and control, not truth or protection. Watch this.
And we're not after Pete. They can do what they want. Pete can do what he wants with that.
Right.
We care about, justice being done. But this was all about the wrongdoing from Marcus and Joni covering it.
The story began with serious accusations against a relative, Pete, made by Jonathan and Susie Lamb. Julie Roys, a journalist covering the story, claimed Pete was alone with Jonathan and Susie's daughter during a key incident. But Rachel's statement highlights some crucial contradictions. Julie Roys later retracted her statement when it was revealed Pete was not alone. He was holding his baby, and Jonathan and Susie's 8-year-old son was also present, she stated. Even Jonathan Lamb later admitted in a Dallas Morning News interview that he wasn't sure if Pete was looking at his daughter. This casts doubt on the original narrative. Rachel's statement also covers the 2020 bathroom incident, an accidental encounter Pete reported immediately to Susie. The incident occurred during an executive retreat. Pete and his pregnant wife were assigned the main floor bedroom. A broken bathroom lock led to an accidental encounter, which Pete disclosed to Susie right away. The transparency Pete displayed at the time raises questions about the subsequent framing of this incident. In Rachel's statement, she emphasizes the role of forensic child psychologist Debbie Linhart. Pete and his wife traveled to North Carolina to meet with Debbie Linhart, a respected forensic child psychologist. After thorough evaluations, Debbie found no evidence to support the allegations. This professional evaluation exonerated Pete, yet the accusations persisted. Another key figure in Rachel's statement is Denise Bogs. Initially, Denise played the role of mediator, flying to Dallas to help reconcile the family. But Rachel reveals Denise later changed her position, raising questions about her credibility and motivations. Was her shift based on new information or influenced by external factors? Throughout her statement, Rachel presented documentation, text messages, and a detailed timeline to support Pete's version of events. She highlighted contradictions in the accusations and evolving narratives. Key evidence from Rachel's statement. Text messages showing evolving accusations. Pete's transparency during the 2020 incident. Professional evaluations finding no evidence. Denise Boggs' shifting role. Rachel's defense raises important questions about the truth behind these allegations. This story continues to evolve, with serious implications for everyone involved. Rachel Lamb Brown's statement offers a different perspective, one rooted in evidence and aimed at exposing inconsistencies. How I wish instead of all this back and forth, Joni would allow an independent firm to conduct investigations to settle the matter. This is a matter that should have been handled privately, unfortunately. When Marcus and Joni took sides, they lost trust with Jonathan and Susie. This is a sensitive and highly emotional situation for everyone involved. What are your thoughts on Rachel Lamb's response and the evidence she's presented? As we continue to follow this story, it's crucial to approach it with care, recognizing the deep pain and division it has caused. If you found this video informative, please like, subscribe, and share. Let's keep the conversation going.